Runaway global warming. Some basics. We've all heard of climate change and probably understand the basics of how excess greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, produced by our society's burning of fossil fuels, is causing the Earth's temperature to rise. We've most likely seen maps of what the world will look like when the glaciers and icebergs melt, causing the ocean to rise. Most of us probably accept that it is a danger to our civilization. Here are a few more figures from NASA to put into perspective how far climate change has advanced. The loss of ice in Greenland has doubled between 1996 and 2005. The ice cover in the Arctic decreases by 13.4% every decade. 9 of the 10 warmest years have occurred since the year 2000. Carbon dioxide levels in the air are at their highest level in 650,000 years. The sea will rise between 7 and 23 inches by the end of this century. Over 100 million people live in coastal areas that will purportedly be affected by the rising sea levels caused by global warming. Despite this wealth of harrowing information, very few people have been inspired to act. Dozens of international climate change conferences have resulted in mediocre, toothless agreements that do nothing to force countries to cut back on fossil fuel consumption. The health of the industrial growth economy trumps all other concerns, even that of our long-term survival. Feedback loops. One of the scariest things about climate change are the feedback loops that will spur on more climate change, even if humanity were to get its act together and put real limits to carbon emissions. The carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases that we've released into the air will stay there for years. Even if we were to miraculously cut out the usage of all fossil fuels tomorrow, the effects of climate change will still be felt in the coming decades. Another negative feedback loop related to climate change has to do with the loss of ice. Ice is white, and when the sun entering the Earth's atmosphere hits the ice, the white color reflects the light instead of absorbing it. As ice melts, it reveals the darker colored land or ocean water below it, and that same light is now absorbed instead of reflected, thus causing the temperature to rise and more ice to melt. Similarly, the rising temperatures that are causing the Arctic ice and permafrost to melt will eventually unlock billions of tons of methane gas that is stored under the ice in the Arctic regions of our world. Methane causes more global warming than carbon dioxide, and as that gas is released, it will only speed up the process of climate change in a vicious cycle. Rising temperatures and the uncertainty of agriculture. Billions of small farmers around the world depend on the constancy of the seasons to grow the crops that feed their families. Traditional ecological knowledge of indigenous and peasant cultures is often tied to this historic ancestral observation of the cycles of nature and how humans can adapt to that cycle in order to survive and thrive. Global warming, however, causes vast changes not only in the temperature, but also in the constancy of the seasons. Farmers can no longer plan to plant their seeds during a certain time of year as they've done for generations, because the beginning of the rainy season is impossible to predict nowadays. Prolonged droughts and heavy rains also cause huge losses in agriculture, thus threatening the livelihoods of billions of people. Even industrial agriculture depends on the rain, and huge crop losses are today considered to be a normal part of the profession. Rising temperatures and changes in rainfall patterns, coupled with a growing world population, is not exactly a recipe for success for feeding the world. Rising temperatures and civil unrest. As climate change displaces millions of people who previously lived in coastal areas and causes vast food shortages around the world, civil unrest is not only likely but probable. People need food to eat, and when they feel their sustenance threatened, resistance is a normal, perilous reaction. Many experts believe that the Arab Spring that began in 2010 and subsequently toppled various Middle Eastern governments was actually caused by popular anger at the lack of food security. The Middle East is one of the driest places in the world and one of the most affected by climate change. Prolonged drought led to extreme spikes in the price of basic food, which, together with the already tense political climate, pushed people into the street protests. Global pandemics. The Black Plague, or Black Death, was one of the worst pandemics in the history of the world. From 1346 to 1353, close to 200 million people died around Europe. During that time, however, the fastest way to travel from one place to the next was by boat or by horse. Imagine the scale of the Black Plague had air travel been a reality during that time of history. Every couple of months, the CDC and other government agencies around the world warn us of the threat of global pandemics. From Ebola to AH1N1 to the Zika virus, the list is seemingly and alarmingly endless. We have become a mobile species, and the connectedness of our world through the ease of air travel makes global pandemics a very real threat. Professor Mark Woolhouse at the University of Edinburgh considers that, quote, from time to time a new virus has come along to take advantage of this new, very densely populated, crowded species, humans, that it can now spread between much more easily. That process is still happening. The viruses are still discovering us. We like to think we discover viruses, but it's also the viruses discovering us, unquote. The multiple crises caused by a collapsing global financial system, the negative effects of climate change, and other unforeseen calamities will undoubtedly lead to less hygienic conditions where viruses can multiply, mutate, and cause a global catastrophe. Resilience, the goal of survivalists. Resilience is defined as the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. Misfortune or change is the one certainty of our very uncertain future. We believe that the true survivalist is the person and the community who are able and willing to let go of unsustainable lifestyles, however ingrained they may be, in order to adjust to the conditions of our strained planet and disrupted society. In this sense, the resilient person will be he or she who is capable of relearning how to provide for themselves and their immediate community. The rest of this course will be, then, a lesson in resilience as we seek to offer you a number of tools, skills, and abilities that will allow you to adjust to the misfortunes and changes that are upon us.